The Praetorian Guard. Chapter 7. The Celebration and the First Mission. It was the end of a long, grueling week. Joan's first live exercise had gone well, and the team had completed their debrief without a hitch. After days of intense training and high-pressure missions, Sarah decided it was time for Joan's official welcome to the team. To John's surprise, the plan wasn't more drills or another covert operation. It was a night out at a bar just outside the capital. The team's choice of venue was a small, unassuming bar, nestled in a quiet district on the outskirts of Nova Lux. The dim lighting and worn leather booths gave it a laid-back atmosphere, far removed from the sterile confines of their underground facility. It wasn't the kind of place John had expected from the shadows of the night, but maybe that's what made it perfect. It was normal, at least as normal as things got for them. John found himself seated at a booth with the rest of the team. For the first time, he noticed something different about them. Mark, Sun, Sala, Marta, and even Sarah looked relaxed, the weight of their work momentarily lifted. The atmosphere was casual, far from the intensity of the training room or the battlefield.
"John boy,"
Mark began, raising his whiskey with a grin.
"Tonight's all about you. You've survived your first run with us, so consider this your official welcome to the Shadows. Just don't think you're off the hook for the next round of drinks."
John chuckled, feeling a bit of the tension ease from his shoulders. He had been part of the team for weeks now, but there was something about this moment that made it feel real. The field test had been his initiation, and now he was truly one of them. Drinks arrived, and the conversation shifted away from work. For the first time, the team seemed like more than just operatives. They were real people, with lives, families, and stories beyond the shadows they moved in. Marta, the team's ever-smiling cybernetics expert, leaned forward with her drink in hand.
"All right, John, you've got the skills, you've got the implants, and now you're one of us. But we still don't know much about you. What's your story?"
John hesitated for a moment. It wasn't that he didn't want to talk about his past. It was just that, compared to the others, his life felt complicated. Still, he figured it was time to share a bit more.
"Well,"
John began, taking a sip of his drink.
"I didn't exactly have a normal childhood. My birth mother died during childbirth, and my father, well, he's unknown. I was adopted when I was 3 months old by my parents, the ones who raised me."
The team listened in silence, giving John the space to continue.
"My father is a captain in the Dominion Navy,"
John explained.
"He commands a heavy cruiser, and he's usually deployed, so I didn't see him much growing up. My mother's a university professor, teaches history. She's the one who was really there for me when I was younger."
There was a beat of silence before Marta leaned in, her smile softening.
"That's a lot to take in, especially when you're that young. But it sounds like you've got good parents."
John nodded, grateful for the life his adoptive parents had given him.
"Yeah, they're good people. They took me in and gave me a home. I also have a younger sister. She's in high school now. She's smart, probably the smartest in the family, but we're close."
Mark, who had been listening intently, raised an eyebrow.
"A sister? So does she know what her big brother's really doing, or is she under the impression you're just some regular soldier?"
John smiled.
"She thinks I'm still in the Praetorian Guard. Like everyone else, it's easier that way."
Salah, always the calm and thoughtful one, chimed in.
"You're protecting them by keeping it that way. The life we live, it's not something most people can understand."
Sarah, who had been watching the conversation unfold, gave a small nod of agreement.
"Secrecy is as much about protection as it is about duty. Your family doesn't need to carry the burden of knowing what you do."
John let her words sink in. He'd always struggled with the distance that came with the secrecy of his work, but he knew Sarah was right. It was better this way, for his sister, for his parents. They didn't need to know what he had become. It was a burden he had chosen to carry alone.
"So?"
Marta said, breaking their heavy moment with a playful smile.
"How does a kid from a naval family end up in the Shadows? That's quite a leap."
John shrugged.
"I enlisted early. I wanted to do something meaningful, make a difference. I was always drawn to the military, maybe because of my dad, but the more I trained, the more I felt like I could do more. The Praetorian Guard, seemed like the best way to serve.
He paused, taking another sip of his drink.
But then something changed. I was pulled into this. Someone decided I belonged here. And now, well, here I am.
Mark, grinning as usual, raised his glass.
From adopted kid to shadow warrior. Not a bad origin story, John boy.
John laughed, but Marta wasn't done.
And what about your sister? Is she following in your footsteps, or is she planning on becoming the next great scientist?
John shook his head with a smile.
No, she's too smart for the military. She's planning to go to university. Maybe something in engineering or medicine. She hasn't decided yet, but whatever she does, she'll be good at it.
Son, who had been quietly listening, offered a rare smile.
She sounds like she's got a good head on her shoulders. Yeah,
John said, feeling a sense of pride in his sister.
She's going to do great things.
The conversation shifted after that, with each member of the team taking their turn to share a bit of their personal history. Salah, always the stoic figure, surprised John by opening up about his upbringing in the Middle East.
I grew up in a place where war was part of life,
he said quietly.
I joined the military to protect my family, my home, but after years of fighting, I realized things weren't as simple as I thought.
Marta smiled at him softly.
That's how a lot of us ended up here. It's never simple.
Salah nodded in agreement, his eyes dark.
War makes you see the world differently. It's why I'm here, because in the shadows, things are clear. We do what needs to be done.
John found himself respecting Salah even more. Behind that quiet exterior was a man who had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer and had come out the other side, hardened but resolute. Mark, never one to dwell on seriousness for long, cut in with his own story, told in his typical over-the-top fashion.
Grew up in the north, cold, brutal winters, but it makes you tough. I've always been good with weapons, so naturally, I ended up here. Figured if I was going to be good at something, I might as well be the best. You need something blown up, shot, or otherwise destroyed. I'm your man.
Everyone laughed, knowing full well Mark's enthusiasm for destruction. Marta leaned forward, her playful tone never leaving her.
And I, as you know, was a troublemaker in my youth. Hacked into systems I shouldn't have, messed with government programs, until the Dominion found me and gave me an ultimatum. Work for us, or get thrown into a cell. You can guess which option I chose.
John smiled.
Smart choice.
Sarah, as always, remained quiet, her presence more observant than participatory. She nursed her drink slowly, a distant look in her eyes. John wondered what secrets lay behind her stoic exterior, but he knew better than to pry. Whatever her story was, she'd share it when the time was right, if that ever happened. As the night wore on, the drinks kept flowing, and the atmosphere grew more relaxed. For the first time since John had joined the shadows of the night, he felt like he was part of something real, part of a family. The camaraderie was undeniable, forged through shared danger, trust, and the knowledge that they had each other's backs. Mark raised his glass one last time, his grin as wide as ever.
To John Boy, our newest recruit. May you survive long enough to buy us the next round.
Laughter echoed around the table as they all clinked their glasses together. And for the first time in a long time, John felt a deep sense of belonging. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he wasn't facing them alone. The shadows had become his family now, and in the darkness of their world, that was the only thing that mattered. The night had been light-hearted, filled with laughter, stories, and drinks. John had begun to feel more connected to his new team, the shadows of the night, and for a brief moment, the weight of their dangerous work had lifted. But as they sat around the table in the dimly lit bar, that fragile sense of normalcy shattered. Sarah's phone buzzed on the table, its vibrations cutting through the conversation. She glanced at the screen, her expression darkening almost instantly. Her posture stiffened, her eyes narrowing with the sharp focus that John had come to recognize as her
mission mode.
The easygoing air she'd carried moments earlier evaporated, replaced by the hardened professionalism of a commander ready for action.
It's time,
Sarah said, her voice low but commanding. She stood from the table, her movements precise and deliberate, and motioned for everyone to follow her. The rest of the team exchanged quick glances, but didn't hesitate. They knew what this meant. The first mission had finally arrived. Joan's heart raced as he pushed his chair back and followed Sarah out of the bar, his mind already shifting into a state of alertness. The weeks of training had all led to this moment, and now it was real. No more simulations, no more drills. This was the field, the real world, where mistakes had deadly consequences. They moved quickly, navigating through the quiet streets of the capital and back to their headquarters. Within 20 minutes, they were descending into the underground facility, the cold, metallic walls of the base greeting them like a familiar shadow. The lightheartedness of the bar was far behind them now. Sarah led them into a large, dimly lit briefing room. The space was dominated by a massive circular table in the center, and as they entered, the room came alive with a low hum. A large hologram flickered to life above the table, casting a cold blue glow over their faces. The hologram was of the Shillong sector, a distant region on the edge of the Empire, marked by vast asteroid belts and industrial stations. John had never been there, but he had heard of it. A lawless place, far from the central authority of the Dominion. Sarah took her position at the head of the table, her eyes fixed on the hologram.
"We've received our orders directly from the Emperor,"
she began, her tone brisk and no-nonsense.
"This mission is an assassination. The target, Duke Darius Cool."
John blinked, absorbing the information. He had heard of Duke Darius, an influential noble with ties to various sectors on the fringes of the Empire. But what Sarah said next caught him off guard.
"Duke Darius has been dealing in the black market trade of deridium,"
she explained.
"Deridium, as you all know, is the primary fuel used in starships throughout the Empire. The Duke has been siphoning it off and selling it illegally, causing a disruption in the supply chain. More importantly, he lured Prime Minister Antony Aramis' son, Antony Jr., into this business. The Prime Minister's son was killed during a recent transaction gone wrong."
The room grew still as the significance of her words sank in. The Prime Minister was one of the most powerful men in the Dominion, second only to the Emperor himself. To harm his family was to commit a grave offense against the Empire.
"The Prime Minister is a close ally of the Emperor,"
Sarah continued, her gaze sweeping over the team.
"and the Emperor has decided it's time for Duke Darius to be eliminated. Not just because of the illegal trade, but because Darius has been openly opposing the Emperor's policies. He's become a threat, a symbol of opposition."
Joan's mind raced as Sarah laid out the stakes. This wasn't just about taking out a corrupt noble. It was about removing a political threat to the Emperor's rule.
"This mission will achieve two things,"
Sarah said, her voice cold and efficient.
"We remove the Duke from power, and we send a message to anyone else thinking of challenging the Emperor."
The hologram shifted, zooming in on the Shillong sector where Duke Darius had set up his base of operations. It was a heavily fortified industrial compound located on an asteroid deep within the sector. The complex was surrounded by layers of security, from automated defenses to private mercenaries loyal to the Duke. Sarah continued, pointing to the hologram.
"Our objective is clear. Infiltrate the compound, eliminate Duke Darius, and extract any sensitive data regarding his black market dealings. The Emperor wants this handled quietly, no public execution, no spectacle. We get in, we eliminate him, and we leave. The opposition won't even have time to react."
John stared at the glowing map, feeling the tension in the room build. The mission was as dangerous as it was delicate. One wrong move, and the entire sector could erupt into chaos. Not to mention, they would be operating on the edge of the Empire, far from any support or reinforcements. Mark, who had been listening intently, leaned forward, his usual grin absent.
"How's the security detail? Are we walking into a war zone?"
Sarah nodded.
"Duke Darius has a sizable private army. Mercenaries. They're well armed and well trained, but they're not loyal to him. They're loyal to his money. That's our advantage. They're not fighting for a cause. They're fighting for a paycheck."
Salah, always the quiet observer, finally spoke up.
"We'll need to disable his communications before we strike. If he gets word out, reinforcements could flood in from nearby sectors, and if any of his associates learn what's happening, they could retaliate." "Exactly,"
Sarah said.
That's why, Marta, we're running point on cybersecurity. She'll be disabling their comms, security systems, and any external monitoring. Without those, the compound is blind.
Marta, sitting beside Salah, gave a nod.
I'll have everything locked down. They won't know we're there until it's too late.
Sun, who had been reviewing the hologram's details, tapped the table.
What about explosives? Is the compound rigged? We're expecting heavy defenses.
Sarah replied.
But that's where you come in, Sun. You'll need to disarm any traps or explosive devices along our path.
Sun nodded, his face impassive.
I'll handle it.
John remained silent, listening carefully. This was his first real mission with the team, and the gravity of it weighed heavily on him. Duke Darius was no small target. Taking him out wouldn't just mean eliminating a single man. It would destabilize an entire faction, a ripple that would send shockwaves through the Empire. Finally, Sarah turned to John.
Your role is crucial, John. You'll be with me when we infiltrate the Duke's inner sanctum. Once inside, we'll neutralize him quickly and efficiently. I'll need you to cover me while I take the shot.
John felt a jolt of adrenaline surge through him. This was it, the real thing. He'd trained for this moment, but now it was happening, and the pressure was intense. He nodded, his voice steady.
Understood.
Sarah looked around the room, her gaze lingering on each of them.
This mission has the Emperor's full backing, but we need to act carefully. No mistakes, no hesitation. If we do this right, we'll be in and out before anyone realizes what happened.
She straightened up, her eyes hard.
This is what we've trained for. It's time to prove that the shadows of the night are more than just rumors. We're the Emperor's sword in the darkness. And tonight, that sword falls on Duke Darius.
The room was silent for a moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Mark broke the tension with a wry grin.
Well then, let's go kill a duke.
The team stood, gathering their gear, as the hologram blinked off. Joan's heart pounded in his chest as he strapped on his tactical vest, checking his weapon and mentally preparing himself for the mission ahead. As they moved toward the exit, Sarah stopped him for a brief moment. She looked at him, her expression softer than usual, but still focused.
This is your first mission, John. Stay sharp, stay focused, and trust your training. We've got your back.
John nodded, his resolve firming.
I won't let you down.
With that, Sarah led the team toward the hangar where their ship awaited, ready to take them to the Cylon sector.